I was standing on my front porch when Evelyn Cross told the neighborhood I had assaulted her. Purple powder coated her hands, her jacket, the side of her luxury SUV bright enough to stain the afternoon air. Phones were already up. Neighbors had stepped outside. Someone yelled that the police were on the way. Evelyn wasn't screaming at first. She sounded tired, offended, like this was one more mess she didn't deserve. "I don't understand why you do this, Caleb," she said, rubbing her hands together as if the color might wipe off. "I try to keep this place orderly, and you turn everything into a problem. If you can't manage your own deliveries, don't make it the community's responsibility." My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from disbelief. Because it worked. For the first time, the woman who fined me into debt, who confiscated my packages in broad daylight, who hid behind HOA authority like armor, didn't have a script that fit what everyone could see. Sirens wailed somewhere nearby. Evelyn leaned closer, her voice dropping, exhausted and furious at the same time. "You've made a very serious mistake," she said, "and I will make sure you regret it." As I stood there, heart pounding, one thought cut through everything else. This moment only existed because no one listened, until now. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Update. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? When I first moved into Ridgewood Glen, I thought I'd finally found something stable. After the divorce, stability mattered more than comfort. I didn't need luxury or space. I needed quiet. A place where I could work, breathe, and be present for my son, Lucas, on the weekends without everything feeling like it might fall apart again. Ridgewood Glen looked like that kind of place. Clean streets, identical mailboxes, lawns trimmed within an inch of perfection. Predictable in the way chaos never is. I'm a licensed electrician. My work comes in waves, long days, early mornings, equipment shipped straight to my house because it's faster and cheaper than driving across town. Packages weren't optional for me. They were how I kept food on the table. That's why I noticed when the first one didn't show up. At first, I blamed the delivery company. It happens. I reordered the parts, swallowed the cost, and moved on. Then another box went missing. Then another. Gloves, tools, small electronics. Each time, the same confirmation message on my phone. Each time, an empty porch when I got home. I told myself it was coincidence. Porch theft wasn't unheard of. Then Lucas's birthday gift disappeared. I'd ordered it early so it would be there when he came over. He talked about it all week. When I stood on the porch staring at the empty space where it should have been, I felt something heavier than anger. I felt embarrassed, like I'd failed at something small that mattered. That was when I started paying attention. The HOA seemed strict, but manageable at first. Rules about trash cans, lawn edges, house numbers. Annoying, but nothing that felt hostile. And then there was Evelyn Cross. She introduced herself the day I moved in, clipboard tucked against her arm, smile polite but tired, like she'd already done too much unpaid work for too many people. She talked about standards and keeping the neighborhood running smoothly, and I believed her. Someone had to do it, right? She was everywhere, walking the streets, checking boxes, making notes. Always calm, always watching, always watching. When I asked neighbors about the missing packages, the reactions were off. Conversations ended quickly. People shrugged without meeting my eyes. One woman crossed the street instead of answering. Only Mrs. Yvonne Park said anything directly. "Be careful," she told me quietly, hands tight around her grocery cart. "You don't want to accuse anyone important." That word, important, stuck with me. I replayed every interaction in my head. Evelyn's constant presence, her casual access to everyone's property, the way she talked about the neighborhood like it belonged to her. I didn't want to believe it. Accusing the HOA board leader of theft sounded paranoid. Still, that night, after another delivery notification buzzed my phone, I opened my door camera app for the first time. I scrolled back, telling myself I was just being thorough. Then I saw her. Evelyn walking up my porch with calm confidence, bending down, lifting the package, and leaving like it was hers to take. And just like that, Ridgewood Glen stopped feeling safe at all. I watched the footage over and over until the motion timer burned into my eyes. Evelyn didn't hurry. She didn't glance around like someone worried about being seen. She walked up my porch in the middle of the afternoon, the way people walk onto their own property, steady, practiced, almost bored. She bent down, lifted the package, and turned away without breaking stride. What unsettled me wasn't the theft. It was the confidence. I waited a full day before saying anything. I told myself to cool off, to approach it like an adult. No accusations, no emotion. Just facts. The next morning, I caught her during one of her neighborhood walks. Clipboard tucked under her arm, phone in hand, already scanning wands before she noticed me. "Evelyn," I said, "can I ask you something about my deliveries?" She exhaled slowly, like I'd interrupted something important. "I really don't have time for this, Caleb." "I have footage," I said. "From my door camera. It shows you taking a package from my porch yesterday." She stopped walking. Not abruptly. Just enough to turn her head and look at me the way people look at a coworker who keeps making the same mistake. "Oh," she said, tired more than surprised. "This again." "This again?" I repeated. She shifted the clipboard to her other arm. "You've had multiple complaints about clutter. Unsecured items. It's not safe to leave things sitting out all day. It was delivered 10 minutes before you took it." She gave a small, dismissive shrug. "Then you should have been home. That wasn't community property," I said. "That was mine." Her mouth tightened, not in anger but irritation. "Caleb, if you can't manage your own deliveries, don't turn it into a neighborhood issue. I'm not stealing from you. I'm clearing clutter. Again. Again." Like this was something she'd done before. Like she thought it was normal. I felt the conversation slipping sideways. "I need my property returned." She looked at me for a long second, then smiled, thin, professional. "You're confused," she said, "and I'm concerned. Stress does that to people." That word again. Concerned. She walked away before I could respond. 2 days later, the first violation notice appeared on my door. Trash can visible from the street past the approved time. The fine was small, but the language was sharp. Formal, final sounding. I paid it. The next one came the following morning. Mailbox numbers not compliant with community standards. Then another. Lawn edging out of specification. Porch light brightness. My work van classified as commercial intrusion. Each notice stacked on the last, arriving faster than I could process them. It wasn't random. It was methodical, like someone turning a dial one click at a time. I started documenting everything, even though a part of me still hoped it wouldn't matter, that I could fix it by being reasonable. That illusion ended at the HOA meeting. The clubhouse was full in that quiet, tense way where people sit close but avoid eye contact. Evelyn sat at the front with Martin Hale to her right, Diane Cho to her left, and Rick Alvarez just far enough away to look uninvolved. When my turn came, I stood up with my phone in my hand. "I want to raise an issue about package theft," I said. "I have video evidence of Evelyn Cross removing a delivery from my porch." The room went still. Evelyn sighed audibly, like she'd been expecting this. "This is exactly what I was talking about," she said, turning toward the board. "We're dealing with escalating behavior." "I'm not escalating anything," I said. "I'm asking why you took my property." She pressed her lips together and looked out at the room. "I run this neighborhood. I volunteer countless hours cleaning up after people who don't follow basic rules. And now I'm being accused because someone can't keep track of his own packages?" I opened my mouth to respond, but she kept going. "Caleb is under a lot of stress," she said gently, like she was explaining something delicate. "Recent divorce. long work hours. I've tried to be patient, but this fixation isn't healthy. A few people shifted in their chairs. I looked at the board. Martin stared at the table. Diane folded her hands tighter. Rick's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. Silence. Evelyn tapped her clipboard once. We're moving on. I sat back down with my heart hammering, understanding something I hadn't before. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a narrative. And she controlled it. The next afternoon, I saw Grant Cross in his driveway. He was walking their small dog, talking on the phone, laughing about something that didn't seem to concern him at all. What stopped me mid-step was what he was wearing. My boots, not similar ones. Not the same brand, the same boots. Same worn crease near the ankle. Same scuff on the toe I'd noticed years ago. I walked over slowly, my chest tight. Nice boots, I said. Grant glanced down, then back up too quickly. Yeah. Had them a while. Funny, I said. I ordered those exact boots. They disappeared off my porch. His smile faltered. You've got the wrong guy. They're my size, I said. My model. And I know that stitching. He shifted his weight and lowered his voice. You really want to do this? I just want my property back. He glanced toward the house, toward the front window. Then his face hardened. You don't understand who my wife is, he said. You should be careful. There it was. Not denial, not outrage. Authority. That night, another letter arrived. This one wasn't a fine. It was printed on official HOA letterhead, signed by Evelyn herself. It accused me of harassment and warned that any further contact with board members would result in legal action, increased penalties, and all remedies available under the governing documents. I sat at my kitchen table holding the paper while the house hummed around me. I finally understood the shape of the thing I was fighting. This wasn't about packages. This was about power, about someone who believed her role gave her the right to take, punish, and redefine reality itself. And if I kept pushing the way I had been, she wouldn't just take my things, she'd take my credibility. That was the moment I stopped trying to prove I was right and started trying to prove she was dangerous. After that letter, the pressure stopped feeling personal and started feeling engineered. The inspections weren't scheduled anymore. They just happened, sometimes twice in the same week. Evelyn, or someone acting on her instructions, would move slowly past my house with a phone out, stopping to take photos from angles that made everything look wrong. A shadow across the driveway became a surface irregularity. A leaf caught near the fence became neglected maintenance. Measurements were taken down to fractions that no normal person would notice, much less care about. The fines tripled, not because anything changed, but because they could. Each notice came printed, formal, and taped dead center on my door, like she wanted the walk past my house to feel like a public example. I stopped ripping them down immediately. I started leaving them up for a few hours, just to see who looked at them. People did. Then the camera went up. I noticed it one morning when I stepped outside with my coffee. That prickle at the back of my neck, the sense of being watched hit before I saw it. A new HOA camera mounted on the light pole across the street, angled just enough that my entire porch sat in frame. No announcement, no vote, no notice. When I emailed the board, Evelyn replied within minutes. It's part of a community safety initiative, she wrote. Given recent behavior, oversight is necessary. Oversight. That was her word for it. I stopped sitting on my porch. I started bringing packages inside the second they arrived, when they arrived at all. I caught myself hesitating before opening my own front door, like I needed to prepare for being seen. I took everything to the police. The footage. The fines. The letter. The camera. The officer listened politely, nodding, scrolling through my clips with the kind of detached focus people use when they've already decided the outcome. When I finished, he leaned back and sighed. This is a civil matter. I asked him how someone taking my property on camera wasn't criminal. He shrugged. HOA disputes were complicated. Leadership roles blurred lines, best handled through civil channels. In other words, not worth the effort. I walked out of the station feeling hollow. Not angry, just clear. Clear that the system Evelyn hid behind wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as intended. It protected people like her from people like me. That's when the neighbors started talking. Quietly. Carefully. It was never in groups. Always one at a time. Always with a glance over the shoulder first. Mrs. Yvonne Park was the first to say it outright. "She took my delivery too," she whispered, gripping her grocery bag like it might slip away. "My arthritis medicine." They said it was delivered. It never came. Nina Torres told me baby formula had gone missing. More than once. She laughed it off while she talked, the way people do when they're embarrassed by how much something scares them. Paul Bennett admitted he'd lost tools. Expensive ones. He'd reordered without complaining because it was easier than fighting. Different stories, same pattern. But no one wanted to file complaints. No one wanted to be seen siding with me. Every conversation ended the same way. "I can't afford the fines. She runs the board. I've seen what happens when people push back." Fear wasn't loud in Ridgewood Glen. It was organized. Meanwhile, the violations against me became stranger. Claims that contradicted previous approvals. Photos taken after rainstorms to exaggerate damage. Notices that referenced rules I couldn't find in the bylaws. When I appealed, I got silence. When I followed up, I got another fine. The money started to hurt. Reordering tools, paying penalties just to keep things from escalating. Watching my account balance dip lower than I liked. I stopped going out on weekends. Lucas wasn't with me. Stopped replacing things unless I absolutely had to. Lucas noticed. He asked why the table was always covered in papers. Why I checked my phone every few minutes. One night, as I was sorting through notices and screenshots, he stood in the doorway and asked if we were going to have to move again. I told him no. I wasn't sure it was true. Sleep got thin. I woke up to imagined footsteps on the porch. I replayed conversations in my head, trying to predict what Evelyn would twist next. I felt like I was living inside someone else's rules, and no matter what I did, I was always one step behind. Then one evening, while taking out the trash, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Evelyn's bins were at the curb. On top sat a bundle of flattened boxes, torn, crushed, labels still attached. One of them had my name on it. I stood there longer than I should have, just staring at it, half expecting it to disappear if I looked away. My address was clear, the same delivery format, the same vendor. I pulled out my phone and started recording. As if on cue, Evelyn stepped out of her garage carrying more torn packaging. She didn't rush. She didn't look guilty. She glanced around once, quick, practiced, then dropped the boxes into the bin like garbage. Like cleanup. The casualness of it hit harder than the theft itself. This wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was routine. I zoomed in on the trash. Different box sizes, different labels, different names, same destination. Standing there in the fading light, it finally clicked. This wasn't about retaliation. It wasn't even about control in the way I'd been thinking. Evelyn wasn't abusing the HOA to protect herself. She was using it as cover, and whatever she'd been doing behind that authority, whatever she justified to herself as maintenance or order, was bigger than just my porch. I walked back inside with my phone still recording, my heart pounding with a clarity I hadn't felt since this started. For the first time, I wasn't wondering how to make it stop. I was wondering how much she'd already gotten away with, and how long she thought she could keep doing it without anyone forcing the truth into the open. After I filmed Evelyn dumping those boxes, I stopped pretending this was something I could handle casually. I didn't storm over. I didn't post immediately. I went home, shut the door, and sat at the dining table until the sun went down. The table was already buried. Delivery confirmations, printed screenshots, timestamps taped together at odd angles, a neighborhood map marked with pen circles and arrows. Coffee cups sat where plates should have been. Lucas came in carrying his dinner and froze. Where do I put this? I looked at the table and realized I didn't know anymore. He set the plate on the counter without saying anything and watched me for a second longer than usual before walking away. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just about catching Evelyn. This was taking over the house. So I slowed down. I got precise. I stopped reacting and started building something solid enough that it wouldn't collapse under pressure. Every missing delivery went into a log, not a rant, not a story, date, time, vendor, proof of delivery, loss, cross-referenced with camera footage. I backed everything up twice. I labeled files the way someone else might label exhibits. Patterns started to emerge. Certain days, Evelyn's SUV would be gone for hours. Not errands. Not HOA business. Long, empty gaps that lined up with delivery windows across the neighborhood. I didn't follow her right away. That would have been sloppy. Instead, I waited. The link came from trash. One night, wearing gloves like I was ashamed of myself, I checked the flattened boxes again. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for numbers. One label was torn, but not completely. A receipt stub was still attached, half ripped. Storage facility, not an address. A unit number. I felt my stomach drop. The next afternoon, I drove past the facility, not to confront, not to snoop, just to confirm it existed. Beige metal doors. Keypad gate. No signs. No cameras that were obvious from the road. That night, I told Nina Torres and Paul Bennett what I'd found. Nina didn't look surprised. She went pale. "I've seen her there," she said quietly. I told myself I was imagining it. Paul leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "That's not impulse," he said. "That's storage." That word mattered. Storage meant intent. Over the next few days, Nina and Paul helped me quietly collect testimonies. Nothing dramatic, just facts. Formula deliveries, tool shipments, medical supplies, delivery confirmations that ended in nothing but empty porches. Then Nina found the listings, online marketplace posts. New inbox, must sell fast. The photos weren't professional. They were taken on a phone, in a garage. Same concrete floor, same storage shelves. Same blue tarp folded in the corner. Paul zoomed in on one image of a toolkit and pointed at the reflection in the plastic wrapping. "That's her," he said. "Once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it." I finally confronted Evelyn again, but not the way I had before. No anger. No accusations. No raised voice. I caught her near the clubhouse, clipboard under her arm, moving with the same practiced efficiency she always did. "Evelyn," I said, "we need to talk." She sighed, already annoyed. "Caleb, I really don't have time for this." "I'm not here to argue," I said evenly. "I'm here to give you a chance to stop before this becomes something you can't manage." That got her attention. She smiled, but it was thinner now. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said. "I'm documenting." Her eyes flicked to my phone. "Not fear, calculation. You've been taking packages from multiple homes," I continued, keeping my voice flat. "There are delivery confirmations, witnesses, resale listings, a storage unit." For half a second, her mask slipped. Then she did what she always did. She raised her own phone and started recording me. "Everyone," she said loudly, projecting like she was speaking to an invisible audience, "this is exactly what I've been dealing with. Harassment. Escalation. A man who can't accept responsibility." "I'm not harassing you," I said. "I'm telling you to stop. You're stalking me," she snapped. "You're unstable, and I've been very patient." As she spoke, her garage door behind her started to lift. Not all the way. Just enough. Enough for me to see tables lined with opened packages, torn labels, boxes from different addresses stacked like inventory, items laid out neatly, ready to be photographed. It wasn't chaos. It was organization. Evelyn saw my eyes move and spun around. Panic flashed across her face. Real panic this time. She lunged for the button and slammed the door shut so hard it rattled. Too late. I already had it on video. "Get off HOA property," she said, voice tight. Now, I didn't argue. I didn't need to. That night, I made one post in the neighborhood group. No accusations. No story. No emotional language. Just a still frame from the garage cropped to show the stacks of open boxes and a few visible shipping labels. And one sentence. "Does anyone recognize these?" The response was immediate. Nina commented first, then Paul. Then names I didn't recognize. People who'd never posted before. Screenshots followed. Delivery confirmations. Photos of missing items. Messages that started with, "I didn't want to say anything, but Mrs. Yvonne Park finally wrote too." Her message was short, careful, shaking. That one was mine. The group transformed in real time from a neighborhood page into a case file. Dates, evidence, witnesses, people offering to stand together. Evelyn tried to respond. A couple of vague comments about misunderstandings and ongoing investigations. No one engaged. She'd lost the room. I sat at the table long after midnight, the same table that had scared Lucas earlier, watching the neighborhood wake up all at once. That was the shift. Not when I caught her on camera. Not when I saw the storage unit. But when fear turned into coordination. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. And for the first time since this started, I knew exactly what kind of moment it would take to end her control for good. Once the neighborhood started moving together, I knew the margin for error shrank to almost nothing. Unity is powerful, but it's also fragile. One bad decision, one thing Evelyn could twist into harassment or reckless behavior, and she'd flip the story back onto me. I needed someone who had seen cases fall apart for less. That's why I went to Harper Lane. Harper lived at the far end of Ridgewood Glen, the kind of neighbor people nodded at without really knowing. When I laid everything out, footage, fines, storage unit receipt, resale listings, he didn't interrupt. He watched, took notes, asked for dates. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled slowly. "This isn't petty theft," he said. "It's organized, patterned, and the HOA angle is how she justifies it to herself." I asked him how sure he was. He met my eyes. Because I've spent 30 years watching people convince themselves they're doing the right thing while committing felonies. That was the moment this stopped being emotional and became procedural. Harper walked me through what mattered and what didn't, what a defense attorney would attack, what the police would hesitate on, what could get me in trouble if I wasn't careful. When I mentioned the idea of a marked package, he stopped me immediately. "Listen carefully," he said. "You can't set a booby trap, not legally. If it explodes outward, blinds her, knocks her back, doesn't matter what she did first, you go to jail." My stomach tightened. "So it's off the table?" "No," he said. "It's refined." He pulled out a pen and sketched on a scrap of paper. "It has to mark up. Vertical release only. No pressure wave. No injury. If it ruins her shirt, she's marked property. If it hurts her, you're the criminal." I nodded slowly. "Documentation, not punishment." "Exactly," he said. "This isn't revenge. It's proof. I built the package like I build wiring tested, redundant, precise, non-toxic dye. Invisible until triggered. Released only when the box was lifted or opened in a very specific way. I tested it multiple times in controlled conditions, different angles, different grips, nothing accidental, nothing that could be spun. While I worked, the neighborhood quietly prepared. Nina, coordinated witnesses. Paul made sure people knew where to stand without clustering. Mrs. Park agreed to sit by her window during the delivery window, camera ready. 2 others positioned themselves near the corner and the mailbox cluster. Phones charged. Storage cleared. No commentary. No confrontation. Harper reached out to a detective he trusted, someone willing to observe without tipping Evelyn off. Not to intervene immediately, just to be close. Then Evelyn struck back, not with fines this time. With intimidation. Mrs. Park called me late in the afternoon, her voice shaking. A man had come to her door. Well-dressed, polite. He said he was a private consultant helping resolve neighborhood disputes. He asked about me, about my behavior, about whether I seemed agitated or confused. When she said she didn't feel comfortable answering, he smiled and suggested it might be easier for everyone if she stayed out of things she didn't fully understand. She recorded the entire conversation. When I watched it, my jaw clenched. He never threatened her outright. He didn't have to. The implication did the work for him. Harper watched it once and nodded grimly. She's trying to poison witnesses. That recording went straight into the evidence folder. She's panicking, he said. And panicking people make mistakes. The delivery day arrived quietly. I ordered the bait package openly. Oversized box. Expensive-sounding label. Tracking alerts on. No secrecy. I wanted it to look ordinary and tempting, the way everything else had. The moment it hit my porch, my phone buzzed. I didn't move it. Inside the house, the air felt thick. I checked the live feed, then checked it again. Outside, the neighborhood looked exactly the same as it always did. Sunlight, passing cars. A couple walking their dog. An hour passed. Then I saw Evelyn's SUV. It rolled down the street slowly, not stopping. Not even turning her head, just passing. 10 minutes later, it passed again, slower this time. Harper texted me one word, circling. I stayed still. Another pass, then another. Each time, she slowed just a little more, like she was measuring whether anyone had noticed her noticing. Finally, she parked down the block and got out on foot. She walked past my house first, phone to her ear, pretending to be on a call. She didn't look at the porch directly. She didn't need to. She already knew what was there. From inside, I watched her pace past the camera's edge and disappear. I forced my breathing to slow. This was the part Harper warned me about, the moment where doubt creeps in and makes you do something stupid. Then she turned around. My phone vibrated as messages came in from neighbors watching from windows and doorways. Everyone was in position. No one was speaking. Evelyn walked back toward my house with the same posture she brought to HOA meetings, shoulders back, expression controlled, like she was about to correct a problem she'd already solved in her head. She reached the bottom of my steps and hesitated, just for a second. I could almost see the calculation happening. Risk versus habit. Control versus caution. She glanced left, right, down the street. No one rushed out. No one confronted her. The neighborhood stayed quiet on purpose. Her shoulders relaxed. Authority, she decided, still protected her. Evelyn stepped onto my porch like she owned it. From inside, my pulse thudded in my ears. This wasn't adrenaline anymore. It was inevitability. The sense that everything leading up to this had narrowed into one clean line. She stopped in front of the box and smiled, not cruelly, not gleefully, but with the tired satisfaction of someone about to finish an unpleasant task. I thought about Harper's warning. About precision, about how thin the line was between proof and disaster. Evelyn reached down, and in that moment, watching her fingers curl around the edge of the package, I understood something chilling. She wasn't afraid of being seen. She was afraid of not being seen, of losing the chance to control the story one last time. She tightened her grip, and the neighborhood held its breath. The street went unnaturally quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that feels staged, like everyone has agreed to stop breathing at the same time. Cars still passed at the far end of the block, but closer in, nothing moved. Curtains were still. Front doors stayed closed. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. From inside my house, I watched the live feed like it might blink out if I looked away. Evelyn stood at the edge of my porch, one hand on her hip, the other holding her phone at chest level. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't nervous. She looked annoyed, like she'd already decided this was another mess she'd have to clean up herself. She glanced directly at the door camera and sighed. "Honestly," she said out loud, voice carrying just enough to be heard. "This is what happens when people refuse to take responsibility." She stepped closer to the package, circling it once like an inspector. She nudged it lightly with her foot, then shook her head. "You know," she said louder now, "it's irresponsible to leave things unattended like this. Anyone could take it, and then I have to deal with the complaints." Her tone wasn't mocking. It was weary, put upon. The voice of someone who believed she was doing unpaid labor for ungrateful people. Across the street, I caught the slightest movement in Nina's window as she adjusted her phone. Paul stood frozen on his porch, broom resting against his leg, eyes locked on Evelyn. "Mrs. the Mrs." Park's silhouette didn't move at all. Evelyn crouched slightly, reading the label. Her expression softened into something almost sympathetic. "Expensive," she murmured. "Of course." She straightened and looked toward my front door. "Caleb," she called, like she was talking to a child who refused to come downstairs. "If you're home, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't keep doing this." I stayed still. Responding would have given her control. Harper had been clear about that. Evelyn waited a beat, then another. When no one answered, her jaw tightened. She raised her phone a little higher and angled it so it clearly captured her face, the package, and my front door all at once. "I'm recording," she announced calmly, "just so there's no confusion later." That was the tell. She wasn't documenting for safety. She was pre-writing the story she planned to tell. She bent down again, closer this time, inspecting the seams of the box like she was looking for damage. Her fingers hovered just above the tape, then pulled back. She stood up, exhaled slowly, and shook her head. "I shouldn't have to do this," she said. "But someone has to." That line landed heavier than any threat, because in her mind, she wasn't stealing. She was correcting a problem. Evelyn glanced down the street once more. Her eyes moved deliberately, checking angles, houses, parked cars. She was making sure no one had the nerve to step outside. No one did. That was the point. The neighborhood stayed quiet, not because it was afraid of her anymore, but because everyone understood the moment needed space to unfold. Her shoulders relaxed. Whatever calculations she'd been running, she'd reached a conclusion. Authority still applied. She reached out and placed one hand on the package. Nothing happened. For a fraction of a second, I felt a spike of cold panic. Not because I thought the trap failed, but because I understood how easily she could still walk away and claim victory. Evelyn tested the weight, lifting one corner just off the porch. Still nothing. She smiled to herself. There it was. The satisfaction, not gloating relief. Relief that the world was still behaving the way she expected it to. She shifted her grip, sliding her fingers fully underneath the box. Across the street, Paul's hand trembled as he tightened his hold on his phone. Nina leaned forward behind the glass. My pulse thudded so hard, I was sure it had to be audible. Evelyn straightened slowly, lifting the package clear of the porch. She held it there for a second, suspended between ground and air, like she was savoring the act of taking responsibility. "I'll deal with this," she said quietly. And in that stretched moment before anything else happened, I felt the full weight of the risk. If the release failed, she'd walk away with another box and another story about my instability. If it worked the wrong way, I'd be the one in handcuffs. If someone panicked and rushed out too early, the moment would shatter. Everything narrowed down to the space between her hands and that box. Evelyn adjusted her grip again, fingers curling tighter, pulling the package toward her body. Time seemed to slow, each movement dragging, exaggerated, like my brain was trying to record every detail before something irreversible happened. Her mouth opened, already forming the next sentence she planned to say to justify it all. And then, the box shifted in her hands, just enough. Enough to trigger what she thought she'd controlled. The moment before the change felt endless. The moment after would change everything. The release was sharp and sudden, more violent in sound than force. A flat pop cracked the air, and a column of violet powder shot straight up from the box into Evelyn's hands, her sleeves, the underside of her chin. It wasn't an explosion outward. It was a mark, thick, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. For half a second, no one moved. Then Evelyn screamed. "What is this? My eyes. You did this. This is a chemical attack." She staggered backward, dropping the box. The powder clung to her skin and clothes like wet paint. She wiped at her face with her palms and only spread it farther, smearing violet across her cheeks and forehead. The wind caught the rest and carried it onto the side of her SUV, striping the door and window in bright streaks. Foams went up everywhere. Evelyn spun in a tight circle, breath coming fast now, voice rising. "He attacked me." "You all saw it. He set a trap." A patrol car screeched to a stop at the corner. The first officer was out of the car before it fully halted. He took in the scene in one glance. A woman covered in purple, shaking and yelling. A man inside a house behind glass. A crowd filming. "Taser," the officer shouted, already drawing it. "Hands up." Now. My heart dropped straight through my chest. I raised my hands immediately, palms open, every instinct screaming that I'd crossed the line without meaning to. Evelyn turned toward the officer like she'd been waiting for him. "Thank God," she cried, the words tumbling out fast and practiced. "He's been harassing me for months. I told you. He's unstable. He set a booby trap, some kind of chemical." The officer took a step toward my door. For a terrible, suspended moment, it looked like she was going to win again. I could hear my own pulse. I could hear someone behind the camera whisper, "Oh no." Then another voice cut through the noise. "Hold." The detective stepped forward from the second car, calm, unhurried, eyes already locked on Evelyn's hands. "Ma'am," she said evenly, "why are your fingerprints all over a package addressed to someone else?" Evelyn blinked. I was securing it." "It was left unattended." The detective nodded once, as if she'd expected that answer. "And you do that often?" Evelyn hesitated, just a fraction too long. Paul's voice broke, shaky but loud enough. It's not just him." He held up his phone. His hand was trembling. "The formula," he said. "Blue box. I saw you." Nina spoke next, barely above a whisper. "That one was mine." Mrs. Park stepped out onto her porch for the first time. Her voice was small, but it carried. "My medicine." The detective didn't look surprised. She looked like she was checking items off a list. Evelyn's composure cracked. "They're lying," she snapped. "They're angry because I enforce rules. Someone has to keep standards here." The officer with the taser glanced between us, uncertainty flickering across his face. The detective turned to him. "Stand down." Then she looked back at Evelyn. "We have months of delivery confirmations. Video footage. Witnesses. A storage unit tied to resale listings. And now this." Evelyn's mouth opened, closed. "This is entrapment," she tried. "You can't. You open the package," the detective said calmly. "On camera. In front of witnesses." Evelyn looked down at her hands, still stained, still glowing violet against her skin. For the first time, she seemed to understand that there was no way to explain it. She tried one last time to pull rank. "I'm HOA leadership," she said, voice sharp but thin now. "You can't treat me like—" "Leadership isn't immunity," the detective said. She nodded to the officer. The handcuffs came out. The click, when they closed around Evelyn's wrists, was quiet, almost delicate. Evelyn's mouth opened again, ready to scream, ready to rage, but nothing came out. The fight drained out of her all at once. Her shoulders folded inward. The clipboard slipped from her fingers and hit the concrete with a hollow sound. No one spoke. The silence stretched, heavy and complete. Purple dust clung to her clothes, her hair, her hands, like a confession she couldn't wash off. The officer guided her down the steps. She didn't resist. She didn't argue. She didn't look at anyone. As they led her toward the patrol car, phones kept recording, but no one cheered. No one shouted. The neighborhood just watched. And standing there behind the glass, hands finally lowering, I realized something with a clarity that made my knees weak. The most powerful moment wasn't the explosion. It was the silence after. The moment when the story she'd controlled for so long collapsed under its own weight, and there was nothing left for her to say. The street didn't erupt after Evelyn was taken away. It didn't need to. People lingered instead, standing in small clusters, speaking softly, replaying what they'd just seen, like they were afraid it might undo itself if they moved too fast. Doors stayed open longer than usual. Curtains were pulled back instead of shut. The air felt lighter, not because anyone was celebrating, but because something heavy had finally been removed. The consequences came quickly after that, real charges. Not warnings, not HOA letters. Theft, organized theft, intimidation. Evidence connected cleanly enough that no one could shrug it off as a misunderstanding. Evelyn's name vanished from official emails within days. Then the board went quiet. Resignations followed, some sudden, some carefully worded. Meetings were canceled. Fines were frozen. A few weeks later, the old HOA dissolved and reformed under residents who actually lived here and listened. For the first time since I moved in, nothing was taped to my door, no notices, no threats, no cameras pointed at my porch. The neighborhood changed in small ways first. Nina waved when she saw me instead of looking down. Paul helped someone fix a fence without worrying about measurements. Mrs. Mizers. Park started sitting on her porch again in the evenings, flowers blooming beside her like the fear had never touched them. Deliveries arrived and arrived. My house settled too. The table cleared. The papers disappeared back into folders. Coffee cups became coffee cups again, not placeholders for evidence. I slept through the night without jolting awake at every sound on the porch. Lucas noticed before I said anything. One evening, we were outside tossing a baseball back and forth. It rolled onto the porch once. Neither of us looked at it. We just kept playing. That was enough. The house Evelyn lived in went up for sale quietly. No drama, no announcement. Just a sign and an empty driveway. I didn't feel triumph when I saw it. I felt relief, because neighborhoods aren't supposed to run on fear. Authority isn't supposed to be armor, and control only works when everyone agrees to stay silent. What ended this didn't start with a trap or a camera. It started when people realized they weren't alone. Now Ridgewood Glen feels like a place again, not a system, not a hierarchy, just a neighborhood where kids ride bikes, packages sit on porches, and doors open without hesitation. And every time I step outside now, I'm reminded of something simple. Power collapses the moment it's forced into the light. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Update and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from?